The Soldier and the Genie. On a dark rainy night, where you couldn't see more than 5 feet ahead of you, a few soldiers were on the night watch. It was a typical night for them minus the rain, where they could hardly keep their eyes open. When suddenly they heard the blaring sound of the camp's alarms. The sound woke all the sleeping soldiers and made the night watch that much more alert. It didn't take long for the camp to be noisy with sounds of soldiers asking what was happening. They had been on a mission to hunt down a violent tribe of goblins. They had been on the trail of the goblins for a week now and were so close to sniffing them out. So, it came as a surprise for them to hear the sudden alarm. "Get your equipment and get ready to fight. The enemy has surrounded us, and I won't lie to you boys, this will be a hard fight," yelled Captain Morgan. What the soldiers didn't know was that the situation was way more dire than what Captain Morgan stated. The camp was being surrounded by goblins, hobgoblins, shaman goblins, gladiator goblins, and more. There were hundreds of these monsters surrounding them, and the captain didn't see a way out with only 50 soldiers with him. Captain Morgan could only sight, do his job, and pray to the gods that they made it out of this mess alive. Soldiers line up and get into position, shield bearers and warriors surround the archers and mages. Then pray to the gods that we make out of this alive, yelled Captain Morgan with authority in his voice. All the soldiers were nervous but still followed the instructions they were given. Not more than 30 seconds after lining up, the soldiers heard the roars of the monsters. Although scared, they didn't flinch and stood their ground. The roars came closer and closer until Captain Morgan yelled for the archers to aim their arrows and shoot. Not more than a second later, pandemonium happened around them. Roars of pain and anger came out of the mouths of the enemy monsters, which made them rush faster towards the human soldiers to finish the entrapment. The soldiers saw this and held their ground. The shield bearers held their shields tighter, the warriors flexed their hands around their swords, the archers repeatedly aimed and shoot their arrows, and the mages chanted their spells. Bam! The goblin warriors ran into the shield bearers at full speed without stopping. The soldiers didn't buckle at the impact. They channeled their fear of death and adrenaline running through their veins into their arms and legs. They held back the goblins like the Titan Atlas holding the world on his sodders. The all-out brawl between the monsters and the soldiers began. Shields were bashing, swords were swinging, limbs were flying, fireballs were exploding. The battle seemed like it was hell on earth. While the battle was being fought, Captain Morgan had a clear head. Although he saw the goblins going down, he also saw his soldiers getting injured. He knew that this couldn't go on much longer, or this battle would be his and his soldiers' graveyard. Captain Morgan looked around him to see if he could find a weak point in the monster's formation that he could exploit. He was looking and looking but couldn't find one concrete direction to exploit. He was staring to lose hope. Then he saw it. The one ray of hope out of this dreaded nightmare. He focused and planned his next move. Captain Morgan then directed his mana to his throat to amplify his voice for his soldiers to hear him in this cacophony of death and misery that was this battle. "Listen up, boys, I won't lie to you, this battle is looking grim for us, and this might be where we draw our last breath." The light in the soldiers' eyes visibly dimmed hearing the captain's pessimistic words. They knew in their hearts that what the captain said was the truth. No matter how much goblins they put down, more kept pouring in. They were getting tired and the injuries were starting to pile. It truly was a grim situation they were in. But who are we? We are the swords that fight the enemies of our people. We are the shield that blocks the wicked from the weak. We are the soldiers of the Gorgon Empire, and we will not be stopped. The dimming light in the soldiers' eyes started to light back up. Though knowing that the situation hadn't changed, they were reminded of who they are and who they fought for. Just being reminded of these two things, a fire was lit in their hearts. They were willing to put their lives on the line and fight to the last breath. Follow me and be quick. This might be our only chance, and we will not miss it, roared Captain Morgan. The soldiers followed Captain Morgan. They fought for 5 minutes in a row trying to get out the entrapment. They were getting more tired as time passed by. Unfortunately, that was when the first soldier fell to his injuries. "Tell my wife and kids I love them," he said on his dying breath. Tears started to flow from his comrades' eyes. They knew he was only the first casualty and probably won't be the last. Even through all the pain, the soldiers fought with all they had. Minutes passed as the soldiers slowly started to fall. Captain Morgan turned back to see all his soldiers that were left. There were only 5 left, including himself. It pained him to no end. All the laughs, smiles, and angry moments with his soldiers crossed his eyes. A tear couldn't help but fall from his eyes. He turned back around and yelled "Charge" as they finally passed through the last goblins. Captain Morgan wanted to catch his breath after escaping from the entrapment, but he knew that he couldn't. "Escape as far as you can and try to rendezvous 5 miles east to the small cave we passed. If by noon tomorrow no one shows up to the spot, I will assume only the worst," stated Captain Morgan as they ran away. That was the last thing that was said that night as everyone went their own way. As Zol Dupree ran zigzagging through the trees trying to escape, he ran Captain Morgan's last words through his mind. "Escape, escape, escape," he kept telling himself. "They will meet at the rendezvous point and we all will make it out alive," he thought. That was the only thing that kept him going. Hours passed as the rain lessened and the footsteps stopped. Zol was still going since stopping meant death. 30 minutes passed as the rain finally stopped. He then as well stopped to catch his breath. All the fatigue of the night caught up to him. All he remembered was how helpless the situation was. His fellow soldiers' smiles, courage, and defiance towards death almost overwhelmed him. One single tear fell down his face in remembrance of how short life was. Zol sat down behind a tree to catch his breath and come to terms to what happened. 5 minutes later he tried getting up, but his body started to scream for a bigger rest. Not knowing if he was still being chased or not, he had to get up regardless. It took Zol more than a minute to get back on his feet. When he did, he almost toppled over. By pure force of will he stood his ground. Zol took his surroundings in, thinking of his next move. He then remembered that the captain told them to rendezvous at the small cave. He closed his eyes and started to take a couple of deep breaths, while emptying his mind of all distractions. Time passed when he abruptly opened his eyes. A fierce calculating light passed through them. He knew what he had to do next. Stealthily and as fast as he can, Zol circled back around. He was like a reaper in the night. Every time he found a solo goblin wandering the night, he snapped its neck. He didn't let the anger of the past get to him. He had a mission to accomplish, and he wouldn't let his emotion get the best of him. It took more than 3 hours and more than 50 bodies on his hands to find the cave. Zol scouted a quarter of a mile around the cave to make sure that it was safe. It took more than 30 minutes to finish. When he was sure that he was safe, he entered the small cave with caution. The cave was about 10 meters deep and relatively safe. With a semblance of safety, Zol slid down the cave wall and sat down with visible exhaustion on his face. The enormity of the night finally got to him. He was tired, sad, and slightly lonely. It was the first time in months since he joined the army that the night was so quiet. It felt foreign to Zol. He was used to the hustle and bustle of army life, with laughter, cries of pain, and all-around camaraderie of his peers. Without it, he felt empty. Time passed as Zol tried to keep his eyes open, but his exhaustion took the better of him. It didn't take long before he fell asleep. He lost control of his mana, which in turn let the blood from his cuts start to flow. While his blood started to flow, it started to pile under him. Unbeknownst to Zol, under him something lost in the river of time laid. Like and subscribe.